Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Christina Bain, and I am the Director of the Initiative on Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery at Babson College. I want to welcome all of you to our webinar today, and we're thrilled that you could join us. The title of our webinar today is Law Enforcement and New Media Solutions, and this is the fifth webinar in our series on new technologies, innovation, and entrepreneurship in combating human trafficking. And I just want to acknowledge the co-hosts on the slide, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime in Geneva, my program at Babson, the Initiative on Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery, the International Organization for Migration, and our generous supporters, Denton's LLP, and the Terrorism, Transnational Crime, and Corruption Center at George Mason University. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the work of these organizations in addition to also the work that I'm doing at Babson College. So I want to first thank our sponsor today, Denton's US LLP. They're the largest global law firm, and they're doing tremendous work on human trafficking and modern slavery. They are doing some really exceptional work in the U.S. with convening, particularly around labor trafficking, and also with pro bono work with survivors of human trafficking. And I really encourage you to check out their website, www.dentons.com, and look at some of the programming that they're doing. They're really exceptional, and we're so grateful for their support of this webinar series. I also want to give a special thank you to the Terrorism, Transnational Crime, and Corruption Center, Dr. Louise Shelley and Casey Crenard, who are leading the charge there, and they're doing tremendous work at George Mason University in Virginia here in the United States. And I also encourage you to check out their programming. They do a number of events at their center in the DC area, and they do a range of activities, including events on wildlife trafficking, the dark net, illicit financial flows, counterfeiting, etc. So tremendous programming going on there, and we're really lucky to have them as a supporter for this webinar series. Just before I get into the work that we're doing here at Babson, just a couple of technical notes. So we're going to be recording this session today. We started the recording, so for those of you who have to leave early, you can't spend the whole time with us. We know it's 2 hours. We will be recording this and sending it out to everybody who's joined and anybody who does inquire about this webinar. We'll also be working on putting this up on our websites. We're actually building a portal related to human trafficking and this whole series of webinars, which is part of a broader initiative that my colleague Livia Wagner is going to tell you more about shortly, called the RESPECT Initiative, the Responsible and Ethical Private Sector Coalition Against Human Trafficking. And this webinar series is one of the pillars and one of the activities of this initiative, and all of the webinars are going to be posted on this portal that we're building that's going to be launched this summer. And but currently they'll all be posted on www.globalinitiative.net, and you're going to be seeing this web address. It'll be up again shortly. So you can check out all of the webinars and all of the recordings from not only this series, but all of the series that we've done since 2014 on that website. So I encourage you to check that out. So we're going to be having, in terms of order today, after the first introductions and the moderator will be giving an overview of the webinar today and the themes that we're going to be addressing. We're going to go into the presentations, and then we're going to have about 45 minutes to an hour of question and answer. As the speakers are presenting, or if any of us are presenting, including in the introduction portion of our organizations, please go to the text chat box, and you'll see that on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can text your questions, and we'll get to those during the question and answer session after every presenter has presented. We're going to be encouraging you to send in your questions, and we're going to get to as many questions as possible. If for any reason on your screen you do not see the text chat box, please let me know. You'll find my name as the web host in the list of names on this webinar, and let me know and I'll help you find it. So that's just a bit of a point of order for the technical piece of the webinar today and in the order in which we're going to go. So to tell you a bit about the initiative on human trafficking and modern slavery, we started the program in 2013 based on the work that had been presently done at Babson around this concept of really bringing together the most entrepreneurial minds, students and business leaders, corporate, NGO, and governmental partners, and human trafficking and modern slavery activists from across the globe in order to learn, work, network, and build innovative approaches to advancing human freedom. We're also leveraging expertise and resources from Babson College to develop cutting-edge research, classroom approaches, and action-oriented initiatives to educate and activate current and next-generation business leaders in the fight against human trafficking and modern slavery. In addition to the Respect Initiative, which my colleague Livia is going to tell you more about in this webinar series, we're doing some really interesting programming. One program that we're doing right now is called the Human Freedom Entrepreneurial Leadership Program, which is actually an entrepreneurship course and curricula for high school and secondary school students, and we're piloting it in the Boston area in different types of schools with different types of learning environments where we teach a track on human trafficking and teach students to create a business to solve human trafficking, and then provide seed money through the Davis Spencer Innovation Freedom Award that will then allow them to go on and start these businesses from an early age and continue on with their passion into adulthood. And I'm right now working with the first set of students who are engaged in the fight against trafficking, and they have a project specifically on educating on the risks of technology and the internet as it relates to luring into sex trafficking for pre-teenage girls. So I'm thrilled to be working with them. They're the first project that has launched through this program, and we're going to be launching more schools in the coming semester to teach this. So that's one aspect of the work. We're also doing research and convening, and also creating a robust student coalition against trafficking in the Boston area. And for more on this, you can go to my website. We're right now updating it, which is www.babson.edu, IHTMS, which is the acronym for the Initiative on Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery. So I really encourage you to see the work that we're doing, and thank you for going to the website. So now I just want to talk a little bit about my colleague, the International Organization for Migration, and tell you a bit more about their work. They are co-hosting this webinar series with us, and we're thrilled to have them on board. So I'm just going to tell you briefly about some of the work that you're doing. Many of you may be familiar with the work of IOM in the global scale, but mainly what they're doing is protecting migrant workers from exploitation and abuse. They're an intergovernmental organization established in 1951. They joined the UN system in 2016. They have 166 member states and 8 observer states, 10,000 staff working in over 100 countries, Migrant Assistance Division, or MAD, and the key areas of focus are protection of migrants in vulnerable situations, including victims of trafficking, forced labor, and other forms of exploitation and abuse, and assisted voluntary return and reintegration. They also work with governments, UN, civil society organizations, and the private sector to prevent and address human and labor rights violations, including human trafficking, and they provide protection and assistance. And since 1994, they provided this assistance and protection with 85,000 plus victims, which is really extraordinary. They also work on policy development, legal frameworks, SOPs, codes of conduct, et cetera, capacity building, governments, NGOs, businesses, prevention, including awareness raising, data collection, data analysis and research, and dialogue and cooperation. They also have a strong engagement with the private sector, and they work with industry leaders in multiple sectors to help prevent exploitation of workers and supply chains. They also have policy development and compliance monitoring, promotion of ethical recruitment, labor supply chain mapping, capacity building, guidance for the provision of effective remedies to victims of exploitation and abuse, including trafficking and child labor, and facilitation of dialogue and cooperation, and research. So I think we had a problem earlier. I just want to note with seeing the slides. I believe I've rectified that. I apologize for this. I'm actually broadcasting remotely, not from Babson College. So I'm just going to go back to my previous slide. Some of you were looking for the Babson website, and I just want to make sure that you you have that. And I'm going to, let's see, where is the... So there's the website for you right there. I apologize that some of you could not see that earlier. So if you want to go to that website, do check us out. And again, we're so grateful for your interest in the Babson program. So with that, I want to introduce my colleague, Livia Wagner, who is a dear friend and does amazing and extraordinary work at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. And she's going to share some of the incredible work and initiatives and outreach that they're doing in Geneva and beyond. So, Livia, I've pulled your slides up, and the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Christina, for this very kind introduction. And we are thrilled to be part of this webinar series, which is already the third year of webinar series. And we are very, very lucky to have had so many great and excellent speakers and have a growing audience on general aspects of how the private sector can tackle human trafficking. I'm going to introduce very quickly the Global Initiative. And as Christina was saying, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime is a network of prominent law enforcement, governance and development experts who are dedicated to seeking new and innovative strategies and responses to organized crime. And the GI was conceived after a series of closed forum dialogues with experts and representatives from different multilateral organizations and development practitioners and policymakers as well. And as they called for a network of experts to develop a more strategic and global approach to counter organized crime. So this network at the moment comprises more than 150 independent global and regional experts working on law enforcement, human rights, democracy, governance, and other development issues. Our objectives are threefold. They are strategic, analytical, and responsive. That means the GI has different areas of organized crime topics, which you can see here, and one of them is human trafficking. So our selected activities and priorities are the RESPECT initiative, which I'm going to very briefly mention afterwards, but also having a development dialogue, focusing also on zones of fragility and conflict areas, environmental crime, cybercrime, global strategies, and also networks. Reaching out to different global audiences. That means we have a network of think tanks. We have an online blog analyzing organized crime. We have research papers, and on our website we have a resource library of more than 120,000 documents that comprise everything that's related to organized crime. And of course, we have our social media channels. The GI and human trafficking is not only the RESPECT initiative, but we have here also other publications which you can find on our website. The latest one is organized crime and illegal gold mining in Latin America, where a huge part of it is on human trafficking for sexual exploitation and labor exploitation. But the RESPECT initiative, where we're happy to have Christina from Babson and IOM as partners, is in the process of being shaped for a business platform of thought business leaders, practitioners, and policymakers to mobilize the business community as strategic partners, and but to also support the business community with training material and also identify best practices, and to work as a hub of everything that's related between businesses and human trafficking, and how to mitigate the risk of having labor trafficking in international supply chains. So with that, I want to finish and thank you for being part of this webinar, and looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Livia. Thank you for the extraordinary work that you're doing each and every day in the global fight against transnational organized crime, and we're just, again, so thrilled to have you as a partner in this work. So now what I want to do is introduce our speaking portion of the program today, and introduce our fantastic moderator, who is another longtime friend and from the field and also just in life, my dear friend Virginia Greiman of Boston University. And Ginny and I have been working together for years now on issues like cybercrime, cyber trafficking, human trafficking, and other types of anti-corruption and illicit financial flow issues. And she is currently a professor at Boston University, and she is a professor of global cyber law and governance and international law and development at Boston University Law School. She also holds academic appointments at Harvard University Law School. I've actually never I have no other colleague that I can think of who has so many different and amazing academic appointments than Virginia Greiman. She really is an amazing star in the field, and we're so lucky to have her today. She's going to be moderating our discussion. And she's, in addition to her academic appointments, she's also served as a diplomatic official to the U.S. Department of State in Eastern and Central Europe, Asia, and Africa, and has held several high-level appointments with the U.S. Department of Justice. So she's had tremendous government experience in addition to her academic work. She's also worked, I will say, too, for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in our own state and local government. And done work on, and she's done extraordinary work on business development and other aspects of economic development here in Massachusetts. She's also a recognized expert and has published extensively and lectured internationally on national cybersecurity strategies and cyber warfare. And we actually work together on this issue of cyber trafficking through a project that we presently have at Harvard Law School. I'm pleased to welcome and thrilled to have moderating today Virginia Greiman. And Virginia, we have you have the floor, so I'm going to give the presenter privileges to you. So you will be in charge for the next hour.
Thank you, Christina. It's truly an honor to be here with such distinguished speakers, presenters, and contributors to this very important cause. And I thank you, Christina, for leading these wonderful programs and for all the work you do. I am going to do a very short presentation. I believe it will be up in just a minute. And I am going to talk primarily about the research that we've been doing at Boston University, Harvard University, both the Kennedy School of Government, where Christina and I worked together when she was director of the program on human trafficking under the Carr Center, and also a little bit about our research to date. So I'm going to begin with the first slide, which is really to set the stage for this horrific crime of human trafficking. It's set in an environment where we have approximately, according to ILO statistics, 20.9 million people are victims of human trafficking. That's a huge number, including forced labor and sexual exploitation. and that globally, women and girls represent the greater share of the total at 55%. If you look at the 2016 Department of State Trafficking in Persons report, you can see that convictions of criminals in human trafficking increased by almost 50% from the previous year, and more than 77,000 victims were identified. However, the depth of the challenge of the United States in this crime is enhanced by the technological complexities of identifying the offenders, securing admissible evidence, and prosecuting and enforcing the laws across judicial borders. So I begin with what is cyber trafficking. Cyber trafficking means that somehow the offender is connecting with some type of electronic equipment. And of course, we have coined this term in our research and in our publications as recruiting new victims, usually for sex trafficking, but also for labor, trafficking, and servitude. How do they do this? Well, in various ways, through social networking sites like Facebook, MySpace, Google, and Twitter, and many, many more sites, through fictitious employment, immigration assistance, and online bribe websites, and through direct communications like email, instant messaging, and text messaging. So we have developed some key questions in our research. The first, of course, very important, pertaining to technology. The question that we have raised in our research is, how has technology disrupted the trafficking of persons in the U.S.? Second, how has technology altered the power dynamics? In other words, who controls best this technology, the offender or law enforcement? Third, how has the anti-trafficking network responded in turn through the mobilization of certain actors, resources, and agenda? And how do different constituent groups understand the role of technology in human trafficking? Now, we have studied the laws of every state in the United States and many, many countries' laws around the world. I want to present, since I am from Massachusetts, I wanted to present our Human Trafficking Act, which is enacted in 2012. It is quite unique in that it strengthens protections for victims of human trafficking and prostitution and increases the punishment for offenders by carrying a potential life sentence for traffickers of children. So you can see there is a response here from our legislature that this is a very, very serious crime. The Act also links enticing of a child through electronic communication to human trafficking. It also enacted a human trafficking task force through various policy changes, and the task force is charged with addressing human trafficking through service development, demand reduction, system change, public awareness, and training. And it's chaired by our Attorney General, and it includes state and community agencies. And then in 2012, a new Assistant Attorney General was appointed to pursue human trafficking cases as part of the Human Trafficking Prosecution Strike Force, working with the FBI here in Massachusetts. Now, there are laws in every state, and fortunately, they're all criminal laws, and these criminal laws provide great protections, but we would like to see more done in terms of connecting human trafficking and the use of electronic devices, including the Internet. There are many enforcement issues, of course, in human trafficking. It's made more complicated by the use of technology, where it's often difficult to identify the offender. I've listed a few of the issues here. It's very difficult to prosecute due to the nature of technology and the unfamiliarity of law enforcement and judges with the technology. The hacker can engage in criminal conduct with virtual anonymity. The victim may never realize anyone attacked, and private and commercial entities are fearful of reporting offenses due to the potential for negative publicity. So the more we can mandate reporting, the better off we will be. In addition, we have the difficulty of tracking cross-border transactions. We have the difficulty, of course, for law enforcement in terms of gathering and producing evidence. And, of course, we have the different legal systems, which makes it difficult to prosecute. So electronic evidence in the courtroom has been problematic dating back to its very early days in the 1980s and the 1990s. It continues to be a problem, as you see here from one opinion issued in the Southern District of Texas. And the judge notes in the opinion that plaintiff's electronic evidence is totally insufficient to withstand defendant's motion to dismiss. While some look to the Internet as an innovative vehicle for communication, the court continues to warily and wearily view it largely as one large catalyst for rumor, innuendo, and misinformation. Anyone can put anything on the Internet. Thus, we see the problem not only that law enforcement faces, but also the problem with judges in determining whether this evidence is admissible. So questions for today's webinar include the following. How has technology changed the scope of criminal activity? Who is winning the technology war, the perpetrators or law enforcement? What is the next wave of technology advancement that could detect these crimes? And how have collaborations with the private sector advanced the anti-human trafficking cause? I am hoping we will get answers to some of these questions, but more important, we welcome your questions. So please remember to continue to send those along, and after we have heard from all our presenters today, we will look forward to hearing from you. So I'm going to introduce now our next presenter. Each presenter will take about 10 minutes to tell you about the terrific work they are doing. We begin with Stacy Fleischmann, and I want to thank Stacy for taking time to join us today. She is a special agent, U.S. Department of Homeland Security with Homeland Security Investigations, and has been there since April 2009 as a special agent with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the Homeland Security Investigations. Currently assigned to the Human Smuggling, Trafficking, and Gang Group, which investigates the smuggling of foreign nationals into the U.S., as well as the trafficking of individuals within and from outside the U.S., and criminal gang activity. A graduate of Northeastern University, where she earned her Bachelor of Science and Master's degree in Criminal Justice, and attended and graduated from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia in 2009. So I am going to turn over now to Stacy the presentation, and I look forward. Stacy, thank you so much for presenting today and being here today.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you, Christina, for inviting Homeland Security Investigations to be part of your webinar. Homeland Security Investigations, which I'll refer to probably as HSI from now on, is dedicated to spending resources in investigating human trafficking crimes. First, in my presentation, I'd like to start off in explaining what Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, is, what our program areas are, and then I'll move into a case that we most recently did in this district. It was a sex trafficking case that was prosecuted in the last year. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Homeland Security Investigations Directorate is a critical asset in the ICE mission, responsibility for investigating a wide range of domestic and international activities arising from the illegal movement of people and goods into, within, and outside the United States. So we pretty much cover all crimes that have to do with movement of people and goods outside and into the United States and within the United States. So it's a broad area that we do cover. Our vision statement is to secure the homeland from transnational criminal threats. Our mission statement is to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle terrorist, transnational, and other criminal organizations that threaten or seek to exploit the customs and immigration laws of the United States. We have 8,400 employees. We have 6,100 special agents. Our domestic offices are a little over 200, and our international offices are around 62. HSI is DHS, Department of Homeland Security's largest investigative law enforcement presence overseas. HSI advances U.S.-based investigations through coordination with foreign counterparts, and we disrupt transnational criminal organizations before they bring illicit goods, people, and proceeds into or outside of the United States. And we focus on building international partnerships and increase foreign capacity through outreach and training. Our program areas that we cover are counterproliferation, which deal with weapons and weapon parts that go inside, outside the country. We have a program area in child exploitation, IPR and trade enforcement, identity and benefit fraud, general smuggling, human trafficking, human smuggling, worksite enforcement, narcotics enforcement, transnational gangs, and financial crimes. So it's a wide range of program areas and laws that we enforce. Within the Boston office, we have groups that are broken down into these program areas. I personally, I've been assigned since I started my position here to the human trafficking gang group. So I've been doing this since 2009. Our fiscal year for 2016, HSI has initiated 1,025 human trafficking cases. We've had 1,943 criminal arrests. We've had 587 convictions and 435 victims of human trafficking. HSI has a very strong victim-centered approach to our investigations. The victims are the priority. We have a job where we need to investigate these crimes of human trafficking, but the victims come first. So HSI has created a victim assistance program, and I'll go into that in a little bit in the future slides. But we have also developed and we educate our agents on resources and immigration relief that we can offer victims of human trafficking. And those resources include continued presence, which is a mechanism to allow somebody who does not have immigration status in the United States, if they're identified as a human trafficking victim, it's an immediate response where we can apply for continued presence to allow them to lawfully be in the United States while the human trafficking case is being investigated. That is a few forms that are filled out by the investigator. It's presented to a continued presence panel. It does not require that victim to cooperate with law enforcement. It's simply a way to allow that person to stay in the United States and allow law enforcement to proceed with an investigation. It also allows the victim to obtain some benefits while they're in the United States. That has been recently extended. It used to be for a year at a time, where now it's been extended to 2 years at a time and can be renewed again. the only requirement for the victim in continued presence is for the victim to stay in touch with law enforcement, and that's basically to have a tracking mechanism so that we know where those people are. But that is a very productive and great resource that we have in order to further our investigations. We also offer T visas and U visas, where we can assist a victim in applying for immigration relief through a trafficking visa, which is called a T visa, or a victim visa, which has a host of qualifying crimes that somebody who's illegally present can apply for and obtain a U visa. And we can assist victims in filing for those type of visas. We also hired victim assistance coordinators that are assigned to every office, and it's their full-time job to help the victims obtain shelter, resources, get connected with NGOs, obtain mental health treatment, physical health treatment, jobs, any of the resources that they are looking for. So our victim assistant coordinators, we have one in the Boston office. His name is Peter DiMarzio. He's fantastic. He started working here about 4 years ago, and quite frankly, we probably could use 10 of him. But it is something that they have started hiring more of, which is great. We also have child forensic interviewers. We have 2 full-time child forensic interview specialists. They travel around the country. They're bilingual in Spanish. We also have language lines that we can connect to that are open 24/7 to help assist with any language issues that we come across. And I'm going to move in now into a case that we prosecuted out of this district in Boston. This was United States versus Raymond Jeffries. It started in 2013. This was a domestic sex trafficking case that kind of centered around Boston area, but also expanded across the country. It went to Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Florida, California. This person, Raymond Jeffries, grew up in Boston. He was well diversified. He had a drug trafficking ring, fraudulent check cashing ring, gun trafficking, and then he started getting into prostitution probably in his early 20s, and had structured his organization where he had different names depending on what state he was operating in. So he was known up in Maine as Frenchie. He was known down here in the Boston area as Skame. Down south, he was known as Skame Dollars. He had quite an extensive operation. It was very lucrative for him. He ended up recruiting what we call P partners, partners that were also charged in this case with him, that furthered his organization in different states. Raymond Jeffries, he used the internet world to glamorize his lifestyle. These are pictures from his website, his Facebook, and he would constantly have flashy jewelry, rings, Rolexes. He's spelling out his name on top in money. The left picture is a picture of his album that he made. He's a musician where he has a recording. He has a lot of rap lyrics about being a pimp. So he really glamorized his lifestyle, portrayed himself as having a lot of power, being a rap artist, a lot of money. On the left is a posting that he made from Las Vegas. He brought a lot of his victims to Las Vegas, and he would post about it. These are YouTube videos where he would flash money that he made from his organization. This is an Instagram picture at the time that this was taken. This was his top recruiter, also referred to as his bottom. She would make public postings about how much money she would make for Raymond Jeffries. And she did that also to recruit other people to show that she was able to make so much money in one night. Isn't this a great lifestyle? Look what I did. She also, that particular night, it's interesting, it came out in the investigation that that particular night, because she made so much money, she was rewarded with taking the night off. So that was also something that she presented to other victims that were being prostituted by Raymond Jeffries, that if they made so much money, here's your reward. You can take a few hours off. You can take down your postings. He also rewarded his victims with allowing them to sleep in his bedroom if they were the top breadwinner for that night. So she glamorized that through her Instagram photos. As well as recruiting, also advertising online through the many online outlets that we have for advertising for prostitution. Most commonly Backpage that we see in Boston, but there's also Craigslist and Eros and Friend Finder and Dig, and the list goes on and on and on. Backpage has told us when we subpoena them, they had told us that they have a record retention policy of 6 months, and let me see, I have it in front of me. They have adult entertainment and dating ads are stored for 6 months after expiration. Postings in other categories are archived for varying amounts of time. Invoice data is retained for 90 days after payment. So this has been a challenge for law enforcement. Identifying victims and building these cases does take time. Sometimes when we encounter a victim, there are typically other victims out there, and our priority is to make sure that this victim is in a safe and secure location, that they are healthy and in a good spot to cooperate with law enforcement. And often that takes time. When they do, sometimes they disclose that there are other victims out there. By the time that we can identify them and get to them, it may be a month later, 2 months later, and then we start to try to identify maybe Backpage advertisements that those people were involved with. And you can start to see that the clock is ticking on trying to get those Backpage advertisements from Backpage. Often it's beyond their 6-month record retention policy. So that has been a challenge for us, that they would preserve those records. It's difficult, and I think that that's where some NGOs are starting to develop software to preserve records that are on the internet, and that's been incredibly helpful for our investigations. Right now, those records we haven't received consent to use them as evidence. So I think there's some work to be done on NGOs developing software and then cooperating with law enforcement, and then for us to be able to use them as, say, an evidence exhibit later on in the future of trial. But that's certainly in the making. And that pretty much concludes my, hopefully I didn't go beyond the 10 minutes, my 10 minutes of speaking.
Stacy, thank you so much. That was excellent, and we appreciate the great perspective you have given us on this horrific crime and the difficulties and challenges that you face as well. So I'm going to introduce now our second speaker, Duncan Jepson. He founded Liberty Asia, and thank you, Duncan, for being with us today. He founded Liberty Asia to fight human trafficking and exploitation. It is pioneering an approach using available anti-money laundering infrastructure and laws to disrupt the supply of banking and financial services to the funding of modern slavery. Liberty Asia also developed and implemented a victim case management system for NGOs to better manage, store, and analyze victim information. Duncan was a Hong Kong-based corporate lawyer by profession, works in investment management, focusing on regional M&A, governance, product development, and white-collar crime and investigation. At ING Investment Management, Asia Pacific for 9 years, he was regional general counsel and head of compliance, and was recently head of legal for BNY Mellon Investment Management Asia Pacific. Duncan, thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for the terrific work you're doing in combating human trafficking. We're very grateful. And Duncan will now do his presentation, and we look forward to it. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Ginny. So I didn't do a presentation. I thought I'd just talk through some of the things that we're doing and highlight what we've found and I think experienced from what we're doing. The first thing to say is that we're obviously a civil society member. So any work that we're doing in relation to and we'll call it research rather than investigation, obviously is done as a civil member of as a civilian, and therefore attracts no protection as one might as a law enforcement or member of the judiciary in any particular jurisdiction. And I think that's quite important because a lot of information that is actually I guess found or from ostensibly from the victim is from civil society, and civil society has a completely different risk profile than if you're operating as part of law enforcement or as part of the judiciary, and that I think creates a situation of if you want to be involved in the reduction of the disruption of human trafficking, then as a member of civil society you're going to look for ways that can lever your resources. Now we're only a team of 15, and there are no plans for us to become a team of 50. And in order to be effective or of any use, we want to decide, well, how can we scale what we do many times? And I think for us the answer was in the use of information. First of all, the capture of information, and then the application of it to parties who have obligations that would through the execution of those obligations, those activities would then in some way prevent or disrupt human trafficking or an element of it. And the way that we looked at that was quite simply is that human trafficking as a statutory crime across the world obviously has certain definitions. It's got a fairly thorough definition in the UK and the US, but in Hong Kong, for instance, the definition really is only sex trafficking. They don't look at the issue of labor. Obviously, then you've also got the issues of law enforcement themselves in each of these countries. In certain countries, law enforcement are very trustworthy and are trusted. At the same time, they can be relatively free of corruption. In other jurisdictions, that is not going to be the case. So when an NGO finds a victim, and the question is, what do they do next? And the part where technology plays initially is obviously the collection of that information, and social media plays a role in that, first of all, because whether we look to Facebook and so forth, there is a tendency for NGOs to look at social media as a tool and also as a solution, and that is a problem because social media isn't able necessarily to provide that. And I just wanted to read for you briefly Mark Zuckerberg's 5,700 word manifesto from February. Now, I'm not going to read the whole 5,700 words. I'm going to read one paragraph. And this was in response to obviously the issue that had come up again at Facebook in relation to child pornography and other and terrorist messages that were posted on Facebook. And of course, most recently in the last few days, we've had you know, the unfortunate incident with the individual who committed a murder and posted it on Facebook. But he wrote, artificial intelligence can help provide a better approach. We are researching systems that can look at photos and videos to flag content our team should review. This is still very early in development, but we have started to look at it at some content, and it already generates about 1/3 of all reports of the team that reviews content for our community. It will take many years to fully develop these systems. Right now, we're starting to explore ways to use AI to tell the difference between news stories about terrorism and actual terrorist propaganda, so we can quickly remove anyone trying to use our services to recruit for a terrorist organization. This is technically difficult as it requires building AI that can read and understand news, but we need to work on this to help fight terrorism worldwide. Now, the same issue obviously applies to other forms of crime that want to be detected and other postings, and so that there is this effort by, and I think it's still very prevalent by NGOs in seeking and using Facebook and so forth, and thinking that there is money to be invested in there as a way to solve the problem, and that often has led to actually wasted resources. Often also individuals who are involved in crime, either as the criminals, but also maybe victims or potential victims misinforming each other, are going to use, you know, in Asia we have things like FireChat, which is a version of WhatsApp, we have WeChat and so forth, and these are point-to-point, so they can't be scraped at all. And that also creates confusion within the NGO community as to what technology can be applied to this problem. What we did was we went back to the beginning and said, okay, what we really want to do is at least try and capture the information that the victims are providing directly to caseworkers. And at present, that isn't even being inputted, and often it's still very much paper-based. So moving away from social media briefly and saying, well, let's just start with something very simple like a case management system, we used Salesforce, which is a cloud-based CRM tool, just to create a case management system that would allow people to better input that information, and it would be then stored outside of their office for a start, and for it to be aggregated and analyzed. And we have about over 30 NGOs on this system, and we now have, within the last 2 years, we now have about over 18,000 cases across Asia. We've just started with some NGOs in Africa and about to work with one in the UK. So that was a point where we looked at social media and we spoke to people, and then we said, well, this isn't necessarily going to help in Asia. Remember also that in Asia, the internet prevalence is still only around 40%. So the number of people using the internet and using Facebook and other social media is much more diminished than it might be in, say, in the US or in Europe. That said, the uptake of mobile technology is much higher, though people aren't necessarily using it for social media purposes in I suppose what now is the traditional way. And that's quite important, because when you're going out to collect information as a caseworker, what you do find is that although you don't have particularly good internet reception, you do have a phone, and the phone has a cache. So you can use things like FormStack in order to load the information into the cache on your phone, and then when you do have internet reception, that can be then uploaded into the cloud. So there are opportunities there of technology and case management information. What came from that then was what information can then be used. And you go back to this point that we are not law enforcement, and in that we are not seeking ourselves to obviously be involved in and pursue prosecution. What we're interested in is how do we use information. And you know, my background, and the head of the program, who has a much deeper knowledge than I do on anti-money laundering, we decided that the way we would go about it is obviously using the mechanisms that exist in banks to start with that can be triggered using information, the classic anti-money laundering, know your client due diligence, and obviously then things like the filing of SARs. At the same time, obviously, those things do lead to information to law enforcement and hopefully cases. But what that does also allow you to do is look and understand from the victims, from the starting point of the victim, and then using open source information to build up a picture of the actual movement of the people, the movement of the product, and the movement of the money. And then therefore you get this interesting detailed picture of these three aspects moving. And some of that will come from social media feeds, such as the one that the Facebook postings that Olivia just showed. That is important. But a lot of it will come from shipping manifests. It will come from information, say on things like Pangea. They are not traditional obviously social media as we think about them between the consumer population, but they are definitely media that exist between enterprises and institutions, and that is equally as important because that allows you to then build up a picture of what is happening, but using information that's available in the public arena, and therefore not having the risk of using CIs and so forth, of which, of course, to some degree, the victim at the point of talking to the NGO is still really a confidential informant in a sense, as the civil society actually has no real standing in front of the law. So we have to think of those things at the same time. Where we go to from then is once we have the typology, once we have the information in the form that can be used, is how then do you get it into at scale into the banking system. And one way is that if you've been doing the open source research and you've been looking at media articles, is you can use those media articles, this is what we do, to send information to databases and service providers like WorldCheck. And they provide, obviously, information movements at scale. WorldCheck, who we provide profiles to, they circulate their information to about 7,500, 8,000 banks every day. And that is more than 15 people will ever be able to do. We would obviously love it if there were far more Asian banks and African banks in there, because of course, you look at the information from ILO and Walk Free and the Global Modern Slavery Index, and you can see that nearly 65% of slavery is existing in Asia and Africa. So we do want it to be going to those banks and those businesses, but as yet, there isn't as take-up as there is obviously in the West from something like WorldCheck. That said, there are other databases, and the information that we have can be applied at scale to many databases rather than just the one. And that doesn't necessarily mean we need to hire more people. So we're able to leverage that. Information that is much more structured and more complicated, like a typology report, can't obviously be used in the same way, and that needs to be disseminated in a different manner. But again, there are possibilities of using that information with the banking community and beyond. And so what we then looked at is, if we have information about the fishing industry, we're giving it to the banking community for their AML purposes, but should we also be giving information to the fishing industry itself? They then can decide to act on it as they look inside their own businesses and they look inside their own supply chains. We obviously will have provided some of that, so we'll be aware that they have that information, and we'll also be expecting them to look for it. So, we then start to move from the most information-rich resourced industry, which is the banking industry, which I don't think that most, as a global economy, people don't necessarily realize just how information-rich the banking industry is. And of course, the banking industry can afford to be. But if you go to something that is low-margin, high-volume, perishable goods like the fishing industry, there is not the money to be purchasing large information systems or to be creating a market which will build them for you. So you want to find a different way of applying that information. And therefore, you create this information flow round these different industries, from the grassroots, where you have the caseworkers speaking to the victims, collecting the information, all the way up to the fishing industry or the banking industry, to people where it gets to their desks. And in that, of course, must be ultimately a law enforcement for those cases that can be pursued. And as Ginny and Olivia were saying, is that all along there is the issue of evidence and legality, obviously, but at the same time, I suppose partly from my background, is legal risk. Each of these different parties has a slightly different risk profile than each other. Some are state organizations, but they are confined by where they work. Law enforcement agency in the UK would find it very difficult to do anything really useful necessarily in Thailand or Laos. And that is where civil society is able to move, and that is certainly where global business and supply chains do move. They cross borders, obviously, very, very easily, and where any state authority finds it very difficult. And of course, that's when you find the problems with almost a state of entropy. That those who are criminals are able to move people from Cambodia to Vietnam or from Bangladesh to India. They're able to move the products from Uzbekistani cotton to Bangladesh, reprocess it, move it to India, move it to Europe. And of course, if they're not willing to, which is obviously their objective is to break the law, then they have much lower states of requirement and resource requirements to do that. And so we have that opportunity as civil society to move between jurisdictions much more readily and to collect information and speak as partners. And we have, in our case management system, I said over 30 partners there collecting, just doing their daily work, putting the victim information in there. We have a program that is run, which is really an actionable research program, and that's collecting information from an open source basis, looking at the victim experiences, obviously also speaking to people about their own experiences on the ground, and then moving that into other places, be it industry, be it law enforcement, be it regulators. Technology plays a vital role in that. Social media, I think less so, and I think that will increase as the internet increases in many of these places and as different forms of social media actually start to thrive. In Asia, a lot of people use forums, and a lot of people use chat mechanisms and message mechanisms to share information rather than using things like Facebook. And of course, we know at the same time that Facebook and other social media find it very difficult to analyze what they have and to bring to bear any sort of enforcement to that. So there are some realities there, and I think technology is vital in that, I think, as I hope I've described. But at the same time, there are some serious limitations, and we have to recognize those too. So I'll just finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jepson. Very much appreciated. And it was a great overview of the perspective from civil society. So now we're going to move on to our last presentation before we take your questions. Last but certainly not least is Inocentia Apovo Montero. She's a criminal intelligence officer specializing in trafficking in human beings at Interpol. She's a criminal intelligence officer and an expert in human trafficking and child exploitation. She's been seconded to Interpol's Vulnerable Community Subdirectorate since 2014, former head of Anti-Human Trafficking Unit in Benin, has a Master II in International Criminal Law, and she is currently leading research for a thesis on criminals extradition in West and Central Africa. Thank you, Inocentia, for being here today. Thank you for the great work you've been doing, and we look forward to hearing from you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and all its partners for inviting Interpol to join this very interesting webinar session, which addresses a current and challenging topic of law enforcement and new media solutions. Thank you all for joining this session. As mentioned, I am Inocentia Apovo, Criminal Intelligence Officer before Interpol since 2014, and I'm working on human trafficking. I will start my presentation by introducing briefly Interpol, giving you an overview of Interpol policing and capabilities that allow us to counter human trafficking and all other crimes related to this crime. So, Interpol is the world's largest international police organization with 190 member states. Its role is to enable police around the world to work together to make the world a safer place. Thank you. Our high-tech infrastructure of technical and operational support helps meet the growing challenges of fighting crimes in the 21st century. One of these challenges is the new media solutions that are mostly used by criminals groups. Interpol has a global presence in the world with its 7 regional offices in Argentina, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, El Salvador, Kenya, Thailand. There we have a liaison office, and in Zimbabwe, as well as a representative office at United Nations in New York, and the European Union in Brussels also belong to the General Secretariat. There is in each member state of Interpol a specialized unit called NCB, National Central Bureau, which is a liaison or like a focal point of Interpol in each member state. In addition, Interpol has a global complex for innovation, which became operational in 2014, set up at Singapore, and it is a cutting-edge facility focusing on countering cybercrime through innovative training, operational support, and international partnership. As you are aware, many crimes in the 21st century have a transnational dimension and require a global response. Interpol works closely with its member states to prevent and investigate a wide range of crimes such as corruption, crimes against children, cybercrime, drug trafficking, environmental crime, financial crimes, firearms, fugitive investigation, maritime piracy, pharmaceutical crimes, terrorism, war crimes, vehicle crimes, work of art, and human trafficking, also people smuggling, trafficking in illicit groups. And dealing with each this type of crime, Interpol has a specialized unit which is the contact point of our member states. That means that in the practice, if there is a specific case of human trafficking in one country, this country should get in relation with the human trafficking unit within Interpol, which can provide the specific skills, specific support needed to investigate the case. In order to allow law enforcement communities in each member state to meet efficiently the recent challenges, Interpol in its unique position offers them a high-tech and innovative solution. I'm going to talk now about this high-tech solution that the organization offers to its member states. First, I will start with the CCC office, which main task consists to ensure that anytime Interpol member countries can cooperate in real time. This center is always able to assist Interpol member countries in 4 official languages, I mean Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. Can I get the next slide, Christina? Talking about human trafficking and how the new media impact on this crime, for example, you can see on the screen that there is 3 steps of human trafficking. The first step is the activities committed by the traffickers, recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, and the reception. And technology, as you know, can impact at every step of that crime. Technology can enhance criminal activities, and as it was mentioned, criminals can use the new media for recruitment of their victims, for example. They can use also the new media to lead the transportation of their victims. And then as trafficking, human trafficking is organized crime, you know, new media can help all the persons connected and involved in this crime to communicate easily in order to reach their purposes. So from the first step to the second step to the third step, new media can impact very, very well this crimes commission. So that's why Interpol provides member states with a high-tech solution in order to allow them to be updated and then also to be able to use this communication, this new communication channel, and to use them to succeed their investigation and prosecution. One of the most important tools that the organization offers to its member states is I-24/7. I-24/7 is a very high-tech and very innovative solution, higher secure communication channel that allow law enforcement officers to share securely relevant information or data in a real time. As national border boundaries become increasingly meaningless to criminal effective and timely police communication across borders is more important than ever. At Interpol, one of our priorities is to enable the world's police to exchange information securely and rapidly. I-24/7, as I mentioned, is the network that enables investigators to access Interpol range of criminal database. I will talk about this database later. And then I-24/7 is available within all the organization member states, and authorized users can search and cross-check data in a matter of seconds with direct access to databases on suspected criminals or wanted persons, for example, stolen and lost travel documents as well, stolen motor vehicles, fingerprints, DNA, profile, stolen administrative documents. All types of the investigation or all types of data needed can be compared, can be fed within our databases. So the success of the international police investigation, as you know, is dependent upon the availability of up-to-date global data. At Interpol, what we are used to do, we provide our member country with instant and direct access to these criminal databases. This database currently contains millions of records and contributed by countries. Talking about this database, they can be classified by categories, and I can start by the notices, for example. The notices are a warning information, warning system that the organization provides to each member state to warn about what happened with cases in their country. You can see on the screen that we have a large range, many types of notices. There is a red notices for wanted persons. And when this notice is issued, that means that the person is wanted and should be arrested everywhere in the world. There is a blue one also that can help to request information from one country to another country, and that needs a good cooperation between countries, bilateral cooperation or regional cooperation or international cooperation. So there is many types of notices that can be used for human trafficking. For example, we advise our member states to use the purple one that can help them to share modus operandi, to share information about criminal groups behind trafficking network, for example. They can use also a yellow notice, which is very important to warn about missing person. And the other one is the red notice. If they are dealing with a case and the person involved is leaving his country to another country, we encourage our member states to use the red notice as well. So after these notices, Interpol has also a database, and these databases, the first one is Mine and Find. Find is a fixed Interpol network database, and Mine is mobile Interpol network database. And this approach is like, I can say, all-in-one approach, because with Mine's database, for example, if you have this device, you can go everywhere you want with this device. And we recommend this database to our member states to use it at the border point to check, for example, travel documents, for example, administrative documents at border point, everything. It is very useful devices in which Interpol has combining all its databases. So with this mobile Interpol network database, law enforcement can have access to all information widely. We encourage also them to use the Find Fixed Interpol network database, which is the same thing like a Mine, but the advantage for the Mine is that they can be, it is mobile, you know, it is mobile, and they can have also access to the same information in the Mine. So that is the. We have also database of fingerprints that is fed by our member country, and then when they are dealing with cases, they can compare information in this database. There is a DNA database that can be used also, and it is very important to underline that all these databases are kept updated, because they are fed every time by our member states, and our specialized unit in charge of this type of crime are used to keep them updated. The other aspect is that Interpol has XTERA database. XTERA means International Child Sexual Exploitation Database, which allow law enforcement or investigators within our member states to seek for criminals, to seek for victims, especially child victims of sexual exploitation online. This is very important because, you know, during the process of human trafficking, the purposes of this process is exploitation. Exploitation can mean labor exploitation. It can be sexual exploitation. It can be organ removal, etc. But in that case, when the victim is child, for example, they can be submitted to sexual exploitation. And with the increasing use of internet, some offenders are getting advantage of this social network by sharing information, images, or video of their crime via this social network. They can share it on Facebook, they can share it via WhatsApp, they can share it via Viber, they can share it everywhere. So this database allows law enforcement in our member states to block the access to this kind of images, which are very dangerous, not only for adults, but even for the children, even for the victims. And today we have about 50 countries which are connected to ICSID. To April 2017, we have 5,016 identified offenders which are recorded in this database. And it is very important to underline that it is a very strong network, because we have units here within Interpol which work hardly on this aspect, and they work in partnership with law enforcement in our country, in these 15 countries which are connected to this database. And today, to April 2017, we have 10,629 identified victims, which is a very important result and very encouraging result, because these victims, when they are identified, they are rescued from harm, and the investigation process leads to arrest the traffickers also, and Interpol provides with the country, with the place where the offender is, all the technical support in order to succeed the investigation. The spread of internet and technology has led to a huge rise in the distribution of this kind of images that I mentioned. So offenders can access and share whatever they want. So that's why Interpol set up this kind of database. We strongly recommend, we strongly encourage our member states to feed all the database that Interpol set up, to feed this database, and also to use them. Use them means that they should, if they are dealing with a case, they should compare information, share information, and if they are facing difficulties, our specialized units within the quarter here in Lyon are available 24 hours and 7 days. They are available to provide support to these countries. So contrary to the case that was developed from the beginning related to international cases, you know, Interpol is international organization, so we deal directly with our member states, with law enforcement in these member states. And at the request of the country, Interpol can provide all types of support to allow them to succeed their investigation. In addition, Interpol provides also a capacity building, and you can see that we deliver many training sessions, and many officers over all the world are trained on different types of crimes. We have also e-learning training that are available to our member states, accessible via I-24/7. And this type of technology, as I mentioned from the beginning, is available before the NCBs, the National Central Bureaus in our member states. So law enforcement can contact this NCB anytime, and they can request the authorization to have access to this kind of information, this kind of e-learning training, and then they will be authorized. So faced with the recent challenge, that is the tools, that is the services that our organization provides to each member state to counter very well what we call transnational and organized crime. So I would like to thank you very much again, to thank the organizer for inviting us to attend this webinar, and then also thank all attendees. And I'm more than happy to welcome all your questions to give you more information about what we are providing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Innocentia. That was incredibly informative, the work you're doing at Interpol and the establishment of this database to help law enforcement in your member countries. We are very grateful for your work. We're grateful for Homeland Security for being here today. Stacy, thank you so much. And Duncan, thank you for your very challenging work from a private sector perspective and the importance of the private sector being involved in human trafficking. So I want to express my appreciation also to Christina and to the sponsors and to Babson for coming together and putting together this terrific presentation. So now our audience, we thank you so much for listening in. It is now your turn. So I'm going to take a look and see if there are any questions. It looks like we can take a few questions since it's 11:30, but we'll do the best we can to hear from all of you. So I do see a question. Are any of the speakers aware of publications or resources that share examples of financial transactions? Pardon? By HT criminal organizations. It would be helpful in identifying topologies for financial institutions working proactively to identify unusual activity within accounts. Let's see, you've been doing banking work, Duncan. Would you be able to respond to this question?
Just as a point of order, if someone could put themselves on mute, I think we're getting some background feedback. So if anyone who is not speaking right now could just put themselves on mute, and then we're going to go to Duncan. Thank you. Duncan, can you hear us? Duncan?
Shall we go to Stacy in the meantime?
Yes, why don't we go to Stacy till we can get Duncan on. Thanks so much, Jenny.
Hi, Jenny. Could you repeat the question? It came in a little bit garbled. I don't know if it was the back feed from other people in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here is the question. Are any of the speakers aware of publications or resources that share examples of financial transactions conducted by HT criminal organizations? It would be helpful in identifying typologies for financial institutions working proactively to identify unusual activity within accounts.
That is a great question, and I think it would be really helpful to financial institutions to have that information. I'm not aware of any public publications, but I'll look into that and get back to you if there are, but I'm not aware of any off the top of my head.
Thank you very much, Stacy. Innocentia, do you have anything to add to that in terms of examples of financial transactions conducted by HT criminal organizations?
Yes, as I mentioned, we are working closely with law enforcement within our member states. So regarding the financial transaction, for example, we are used to work closely with Western Union, which is the way that criminal groups behind trafficking are used to use to send money to the victims in order to ease its transportation from his country to the destination country.
Hello?
So we recommend to our member states to use these databases. As I mentioned, we have a forensic unit here that can be deployed if the case happens. This unit staff can be deployed within the member state to provide them with a support, with every type of support in order to clarify this situation. So we have another example called Wahala. Is also a way, a means used by traffickers, for example, in order to send money to the victims, to allow them to pay the flight ticket, to allow them to pay the bus ticket, to ease their transportation. So dealing with this kind of case needs to be, to have very, first, to have been well trained, and also to request Interpol support.
Thank you very much, Innocentia, for your response. And I will say in response to the question, we will make available, certainly on this site, any information that may be helpful to you. So thank you for the question. I have another question here. The technologies presented were very helpful in identifying reactively and prosecuting criminals. Any advances in the proactive identification of human trafficking activities? Another great question. Let me turn first to Stacy this time. Are there any advances in the proactive identification, not reactive, proactive identification of human trafficking activities?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think there have been advances over the last couple of years, specifically in trainings for agents and investigators. There's been partnerships with state, local, and federal agencies in these trainings to work together and to join our minds on our cyber experiences and going after human traffickers. Specifically, there's new software that's come out that has assisted us on proactively identifying victims of human trafficking and their traffickers. So yeah, there have been quite a few advances. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot more, technology keeps changing every day, and I think that we could benefit for more software or in trying to keep up with these traffickers. But there has been some advances in the last couple of years, definitely.
Hello.
Thank you, Stacy. It looks like Duncan is back. So if you would like to take question 1 now or move on to question 2, proactive initiatives in identifying human trafficking activities. Duncan?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. So just on the banking question, I think you have to go back to who's getting the information. So, we went to the ground because what we realized is that most of the information that has been collected from victims is simply not leaving the officers of the NGOs. So any perspective of the situation at the moment is absent of all victim information pretty much from NGOs. So you've got to think about what sort of information environment would we be discussing now if that information was actually available. And that actually is obviously very interesting to think about the potential of that. The second thing is that obviously the information that the victim is going to give is incredibly personal, because if particularly in forced labor, they can tell you where they were being abused and what industry they're in and what company they were in, then that information is immediately what obviously banks are looking for, both in their existing account due diligence and AML checks, and also their onboarding. That information, again, isn't really available because, first of all, victims are traumatized, not necessarily thinking of that. And actually, the other thing is that caseworkers don't necessarily understand that that level of detail is useful. And one of the things that I started to do when I first started Libertation, when I was about 3.5 years ago, was go to NGOs and explain why that information was useful. And it was a difficult conversation repeatedly, because the truth is that NGOs are caring social workers and people who are interested in human beings and the human being in front of them, most likely. And the idea that we want to talk about subsidiary names, individuals, whether they're directors, who they're beneficial owners, obviously this is a lot of information. And then obviously who they're banking, which banks might they be using. So that has also been a process of training people to start thinking a bit more expansively about the information they can get. Now, even if you get that, and to be honest, we have some typologies which we do. We do speak to HSI. I was down there last week speaking to Steve, who's the acting director, and Chris, and we do speak to other, Interpol and others. But the reality is that people collecting it on the ground is that if you want to go to a bank with that information, you have to be wary of obviously tipping off if you're not part of law enforcement. And the problem with tipping off is that although under the law it says that if you can give information to a bank, but you would be guilty of tipping off if there is an ongoing investigation, you're never going to know if there's an ongoing investigation, and the bank may not even know if there's an ongoing investigation, which is obviously quite likely. So it'd be unwise to test your mettle in relation to that, and that's quite true. The other thing is defamation, is that where defamation is used as a sword, not just a shield, in terms of reputation, which having worked in Asia for many years and been the target of defamation cases when I was in as a corporate lawyer, it is regularly used. And Andy Hall, obviously the most recent example, published a document about the pineapple industry with FinWatch. All reputable organizations, very well respected journalists, but you're in someone else's garden, and if you if someone has the money, or even if someone doesn't, Champurdy is a very useful way, as Gorka found out with Hulk Hogan and Peter Thiel, then there are ways to obviously pursue that too. So there is information increasingly there. I think we're keen to speak to banking compliance, banking intelligence people to discuss trafficking, and we do speak to a number of the large global banks and a couple of the regional ones in Asia. I'm very keen to do that. There are typologies to discuss, and there are ways of thinking about this. So there is some of that available. On the technology, I think you have to split it into 3 levels. There is capture, analysis, and visualization. I think if you look at visualization, there is a whole plethora of tools out there, whether it's whether you've got i2 or Palantir or Wynyard and so forth, and then you've got there's a website by a guy called I think his name is Andy Firth, but it's called visualizationdata.com, and he reviews. There's about 56 different visualization tools that are available. I think there's plenty of that. That the analysis, obviously, different people have different mechanisms available to them, and if you're in law enforcement or in an intelligence agency, then you've got some powerful equipment. If you're in civil society, much less so. If you're in private sector, in the banking industry, you've got some very exciting tools. If you're in the fishing industry or agriculture, or you're working in, then you've got less and less availability, and those tools aren't necessarily, people aren't readily marketing tools to those industries because they simply won't pay large subscription fees or licensing fees. They aren't able to. So I think it's, and then at the bottom you've got data capture, and that's I think where there's the biggest weakness. And of course the one of the areas was scraping from social media. But if you look at the issue of live streaming of child pornography in the Philippines, people know there's a channel between the Philippines and, say, someplace like Australia, and they can see this occurring, but no one can find out where it is. And there are those limitations of location and geography, of source and destination. And then one of our partners is Verizon, and Verizon will tell you that a huge percentage of the internet goes through their nodes, but you can't identify it at the moment. It's just obviously streams of data. So even though they know where it's going through, it's not like a river. You can't just suddenly dam it up and stop what's going through, and pick and cherry pick what you want to stop. It just that isn't there yet, and that I think is key to part of the discussion. That isn't available. Information sharing, intelligence sharing. I mean, and Incentio was talking about Find and Mind. I think they're quite important. We have our own system for sharing information between NGOs that we built because we wanted also to take out administration from that because we're not law enforcement. And we built something using Alfresco, which is an enterprise content management system, and then built a back end into Verizon, which provides security. So there are ways to do this, but it's still very nascent, and I think there's a lot more development that's available there. So sorry to answer those two questions in a rather long fashion.
That's terrific, Duncan. Thank you so much. We have one more question I'd like to get to since we are running short on time. Also, Christina has posted an article, Disrupting Human Trafficking, the Role of Financial Institutions, by Tom Keating and Anne-Marie Barry in 2017. So that could be very timely in response to the question as well. The final question I would like to pose is, are there particular messaging apps that you have come across as being heavily used for trafficking coordination and/or child exploitation? Also, any new applications or communication tools of note. So, Stacy, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Incentia, and then we'll go to Duncan on this question. Applications.
Yes, there are. We've seen a heavy use on Snapchat or WhatsApp. There are specific applications that we have seen traffickers use, especially for the coercion part of our investigations, giving threats. And it's been a challenge to preserve those messages, to screenshot them or have a victim be prepared to maintain the messages to use later on as evidence. But yes, we've seen traffickers use those applications frequently.
Wonderful. Cynthia, is there anything you would add in terms of applications from your experience at Interpol?
Yeah, of course, I can add that application, you know, everybody is using application currently for any kind of activities in our daily life. Everybody is using the application, and even within Interpol, the organization use social media because, you know, this kind of application, there are an effective method for promoting personal life, personal activities, and Interpol also use this kind of social network, this kind of application to promote its external meeting or events. But it is very important to underline that the organization has a great policy of this kind of application using this kind of social network. And this policy, the purpose is to protect sensitive information, for example, and also to ensure the physical security of its staff members, and also, you know, to protect the organization reputation and its images. So yes. I think that as traffickers, they are mostly using applications for the purposes of crimes. We as law enforcement, we shall take advantage from this application and be proactive, you know. Using this application can allow us to dismantle criminal network, for example, to identify criminal behind a case of human trafficking. As mentioned in one of the presentations, you can see a guy shown in Facebook, in his Facebook page, his picture with a lot of dollars in hand. This kind of picture sharing by a population, law enforcement can use this kind of application to have access to check daily this kind of application and look at the best way to dismantle this kind of network behind human trafficking. So from my perspective, this kind of application, there are like a coins with both sides. They have a positive side and negative side, but law enforcement officer, law enforcement community, we shall take the positive side and then use it efficiently to dismantle the criminal network. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Innocentia. The question I posed earlier, who is winning the technology war, the perpetrators or law enforcement? I'm not sure we can get an answer to that question today, but you certainly raised the important point that law enforcement must use these applications and use them extensively in order to track the criminals, track their conduct, and it becomes an important tool for law enforcement as well as the perpetrator. It looks like that's our last question. Did you have anything quickly, Duncan, you wanted to add to that? Are there any known apps that you've heard about or new apps that are being used by perpetrators that you may be aware of?
I mean, I think by perpetrators, what we've seen and understand is that it's messaging apps primarily. And obviously in Asia, I think obviously elsewhere, but the key is that if you're working you need a message app that obviously functions outside of Romanized script, and that's quite important. So a lot of people will use maybe local national apps that have become available. That's certainly one thing, and some apps obviously allow you to access Google Docs as well, so you can run spreadsheets and so forth and so on. So I think there are those kind of things. On the other side, on the NGO side, there's a whole range of apps that have been launched, and we actually did an analysis with someone of about 50 or so. But a lot of them weren't being used. They were being downloaded, but they're not really used. And of the 50 plus, only about 5 were really being used at all. And I think that's part of the problem. I think on the technology side, just briefly, the problem I think is if you're on the lawful side of this, whether it's law enforcement or a civil society or private sector, then you're stuck with a whole range of laws on a multi-jurisdictional basis, whether it's data privacy, whether it's defamation, whether it's issues of where law enforcement itself intersects with private sector activity, evidentiary issues, that you're trying to navigate through whilst using technology, whereas the criminals simply aren't doing that. And I think that's why they move so much quicker, because their need to have order is just so much less. And so they don't bother about data privacy for obvious reasons. They couldn't care less about defamation or about many of these other illegal other laws that apply to lawful society. And that makes it so much simpler, and they can cross jurisdictions and boundaries willfully through, I mean, as you know better than any of us, Ginny and Christina, they cross boundaries without willfully. So I would say that's quite important to bear in mind.
Thank you, Duncan, so much. This has been a terrific opportunity for all of us to learn a great deal about this interaction between technology and human trafficking. And you have presented today some of the challenges, some of the issues that we face going forward, areas that we certainly need to improve upon, and the need for better technology. I would like to close by thanking all of our speakers today. Innocentia, thank you so much for coming to us from Interpol. Duncan, thank you for representing civil society today. And thank you so much, Stacy, for being here on behalf of Homeland Security. I want to thank you all for your work. I want to thank our sponsors, Babson University, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and also I want to thank Denton's LLP for supporting this webinar, and the Terrorism, Transnational Crime, and Corruption Center at George Mason University. Thank you all for the wonderful work you're doing. And this will be posted. You have the information to access it. We will also publish, of course, any information we can based on your questions today. And Christina, is there anything further you would like to say?
Thank you so much, Ginny, and thank you to our entire panel for this dynamic conversation. It's been a wonderful, eye-opening conversation, and I want to thank our global audience for their contributions and for sticking with us for the 2 hours through this conversation, and for your great questions. Thank you for sending those in. And it's really inspiring to hear of the great work that each of our panelists are doing each and every day in the field, and just thank you for your contributions and thinking and inspiration in these efforts. I just want to announce our final webinar in our 2016-2017 series. I can't believe we're already to the end. The final webinar is going to be on awareness raising and campaign, what and how does social media contribute to identification and response. So we'll be having a really dynamic conversation around that topic. So we hope you can join us on Thursday, May 18th at the usual time, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 to 6 p.m. Central European Time for this exciting conversation and the conclusion to our webinar series on new technologies, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Thank you again. Thank you to everyone for this extraordinary conversation. I wish you the best for the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, and morning. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.